Hi, Tzili.
Hey,
Hey, who?
hey, Tzip.
Thank you. Welcome to Tzuzamen, and we have a fantastic guest today, Janet Grillo, Professor Janet Grillo. And this is the interesting part. She is a professor, very dominant at the undergraduate film and television at Tisch at New York University, and my colleague. But she's also, the list is so she was for many years executive producer on very high level, and we'll talk about it. She did come from the theater, and we'll mention it also. She was an independent producer. She's a writer. She is a director, and she directed 2 features. Three features. Yay. Okay. She's activist, and we'll talk about it too. And when she started, it was not so common for women to reach where the level that she reached. We didn't have the Me Too yet. So she was exposed to, the culture of not Me Too. So yeah, and she's my friend, and I'm very proud to have her here in Tzuzamen and to introduce her to Tzili.
So, since I don't know
Okay.
you at all, so can't you just take me a little bit through your journey as a woman in the industry, and the major points of changes?
Yeah. Well, I should say that I am older than I look. So I've been,
What does it mean?
I don't know why
What
she
does
says
it
it even.
I'm
And
65 years old.
No, that's okay.
No, and you know what? I think it's important as a woman and as a feminist to own it.
Right.
Because we live
But you look very well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
so the reason that I wanted to lead with that is because I've been, in this world for 40 years. And so I've had 4 decades of professional experience and 4 decades of watching the changes happen, watching the emergence of the independent film world in America, and watching the changes toward in attitude and inclusion of women and people of color. When I began, so I was at grad school. Let me dial down since you asked the question how this all started. I was a theater kid, right?
Yeah.
And my interests were always in acting, writing, directing, but it was very much about the theater. And in fact, I went to a college here in the States, and I was doing theater, and I never paid attention to movies. I wasn't interested. But when I graduated, it was a Wesleyan in Connecticut, and it was very, very known for theater. And when I graduated, NYU had just started a new program in dramatic writing, and it was for playwriting and screenwriting and television writing. And so I went with the interest to be a playwright. I had no interest in the rest of it. But because it's NYU, of course, there's a lot of strength in film and screenwriting, and a lot of the professors in the program were screenwriters. And so I started to get exposed to it. And it was like literally, it was like a whole new window open. It's like, oh, wow, look at this. And and then what really happened is somebody started telling me that you could earn money by reading screenplays and spouting opinions. This is weird. For some reason, this little thing happens. I don't know what's going on in my
They agree
program.
with you.
But if I gesture like this, it'll come up. Anyway,
yeah, but we are your cheerleaders. Okay. Fantastic.
So, right, my cheerleaders. So I was told that you could make money by reading scripts and giving your opinions on them, which is called a script reader. That's something that it still happens, but now it tends to happen more in-house. Then it was a freelance gig where a lot of, at the time, and we're talking about the early 80s, there were a lot of companies in New York City that were producing and making movies. There were independent companies that were production companies, independent companies that were production and distribution companies. And there were also a lot of major studios had outposts in LA from LA in New York, their outpost in New York, to cover books, theater, and emerging talent, so that this still was a really active creative hub. So it was quite common to read books, screenplays, intellectual properties as a freelance gig. And so that was putting some, money in my pocket as a starving grad student. And one of the many places that I was reading was this kind of ragtag scruffy company that was only distributing, not producing, just distributing sort of high art French films, John Waters cult movies, and then what would then used to be called drive-in movies, B movies, this kind of like cult movies and horror movies. And I started to read scripts for them, and I just got along with the people there well. And they were in production, in post-production on a film that they had actually stepped up to develop and produce. And they were getting a lot of submissions because word on the street that that film was quite good. And so they ended up hiring me to be their part-time script reader. So while I was at grad school, I was also going up 2 or 3 times a week to this office that was in Port Authority that was filled with eccentrics and hippies and wackos. And, you know, so I fit right in because it was very iconoclastic spirit. And then they released that film. So I was coming up a few days a week and getting paid under the table to organize a script department. They had no organizational system to even manage the submissions. And I was reading and all of that. Well, they released that film. It was Nightmare on Elm Street, which is a huge success. And the company is New Line Cinema.
New Line Cinema became a very well-known, big, New Line.
So I was there for 10 years and I grew with the company. And so as I learned on the job. So I started as a 25-year-old kid at grad school. And I left when I was 35 and had my child. So, you know, I really grew up there. And during that time, it was a very exciting and heady time because it was simultaneous to the emergence of the American independent movement. I mean, I was the first screenings of Jim Jarmusch's first film, Stranger Than Paradise, Spike Lee's first film, She Gotta Have It. I mean, we were all there covering it. These NYU, you know, and of course, NYU was the holy grail for the auteur-driven independent film movement. So we were in New York, NYU was in New York. It was all kind of, there were a few small companies. There was another little company that was sort of nipping at our heels called Miramax, which is why I know Harvey well. And there were a bunch of us we were all friends and we were all the executives. And my good friend from high school, I ended up getting her a job at Miramax and she became like the head of acquisitions and development there. I mean, we were all supportive of each other. And at this time, during these course of 10 years, it was LA is an industry, New York is a community. And so we were really creating the templates, you know, and the tent poles to hold up and build an emergence of the independent film movement. It was called Off Hollywood, right? And then it became independent film making, and New York was the center. And so we're talking about the mid to late 80s all the way into the early aughts. And the reason that there was so much possibility for the growth and development is because of technology. There was this brand new thing called videotape that then became DVDs. Right. And this created a whole new revenue stream. Because until then, if you had a film, how could you derive revenue? Theatrical, and it's very hard to make money in a theatrical release. See, here it goes again. Theatrical release, because theaters will take at first 50% and then increasingly more shares of the box office, so that the longer you're in a theater, the more money goes to the exhibitor, the less goes to the distributor. And also this is very expensive. It's you have to advertise the advertisement. And back then, the cost of the print of a negative, you would have to print and ship these huge vaults of cinema. Right. And so it was a very expensive process. And after that, you'd be able to maybe syndicate to television. Maybe then eventually there was this thing called cable, right? Or you'd sell to overseas, very limited revenue streams. And what happened was suddenly there was a huge revenue stream. And there were years where people were just going crazy, not just to rent, but to buy these videos and then DVDs. And think about the cost of it. The cost of purchasing one was anywhere between $15 to $30 to purchase one. And then to rent it, you'd have to pay each time you rented it, $3 to $5, right? So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of flow of cash that's coming into the industry that was never there before. And that created the risk capital to fund independent film. It became a why not versus a why. And so there was
they were on a lower budget than Hollywood.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So you could throw 500, 700 million dollars at a young, interesting filmmaker who had an interesting idea, who had, these newly minted film students, this wave at the same time. I was at the first year that Sundance was a film festival.
Ah, wow.
So it was all sort of in consort. The rise of the indies, the rise of Sundance, which was creating an opportunity to showcase and develop this kind of talent, the rise of what used to be called the IFP, that's now called Gotham, and IFP West, which is now called Film Indie, the rise of these organizations. I mean, Tribeca Film Festival was decades later, right?
Right.
But it was all coming up together. This ecosystem was developing. We all knew each other. The producers, the distributors, we were sort of all in the same team, creating a parallel universe to the studio system. Now, I want to say that during this time, this was benefiting white men.
Of course.
There were very, very few films
Right.
that were not made by white boys. That was still the operative business logic, was the avid consumer was the teenage boy. That was the case for sure for the Hollywood studios, is that was their holy grail. They were going after, that's you want the avid consumer, the teenage boy. Teenage girls would go to the movies that teenage boys liked, and adult men kind of liked them too. They were like teenage boys in older bodies. So, so all the blockbusters and things, Hollywood was all geared for teenage boys. And, even though adult women have always been a very, very strong staple in art house movies, independent, specialized movies, it was very hard to convince the people who were in charge of marketing and the people who were doing the green lights that it was a solid enough base to fund movies just for that. So if you were a woman who wanted to tell stories about women that were going to primarily benefit and interest women, it was very, very, very hard to convince men that they'd get their money back. So when in the years that I was at New Line, the 10 years I was at New Line, I was very fortunate, it's my doggy, he'll be part of the conversation.
Yes, he enjoys it.
He does enjoy it, that's right. I was able to launch the career of a lot of people who've gone on to have very, very important careers. They were all men. There were a couple of Black men, it could be black, green, purple, but you had to be a guy. And although I tried with several projects and in fact, Nicole Holofcener, who's become a very, had a wonderful career, I tried desperately to get her first film made and just couldn't move the needle on it. So there was the stirrings of understanding of diversity audiences and niche audiences. It was there, but it was really very, very, very hard to get your leg in it.
But I want to ask you something. When you talk about the audience, do you have a way, I'm sure there is a way to follow, to see how many men, how many women, who follows what, because you always check it. And the audience of women is very large, it's very big.
Right.
And still they don't believe that women can deliver a better message for women.
So fortunately things have changed. So I'm discussing
not huge as far as directors are concerned. They are producers,
but there is change. Right. There is change. Not enough change, but it's a very different climate. But I was there, during the years when no matter how hard you fought, no matter how many salient pieces of information and demographics, because there are people, of course, that track audiences. It's a whole part of the industry to do audience testing and demographic testing. It's a huge part of the industry. And you'd bring the information saying, look at who's habituated to viewing this kind of film, adult females, where's the product line? Every other industry has a product line for adult women. And a lot of it was because of television. That what happened is that before television, there was a solid kind of genre of film that was oriented towards adult women, and oftentimes, the grand dames, Joan Crawford would star in them, sort of those big screen movie star melodramas were oriented towards women. And then television came in and they created soap operas, and that absorbed that audience. And also women were at home, right? And so you could capture the female audience during the 50s and 60s through television. So that created even more of a disincentive for movies to chase after them. So that was also a shift that had to happen in the marketplace. And then there's just plain old misogynistic sexism that just didn't want to see it, that just didn't trust women in positions of leadership. It's just a fact, you know?
Yeah, by the way, when I came to Israel after I graduated from University of Michigan, and I went to find a job, you know, to make films, and the guy who was really responsible, he was an executive producer, he was sitting with his leg on the chair, and he asked me, well, are you married? And I said, yes. Do you have kids? And I said, so why do you need this? So I got up and left. It was very unbelievable. So I
There
know
you go.
what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, cultural change takes time
Right.
and it's incremental. And so I feel that my perspective of the 40 years, I can absolutely say with, you know, great conviction and delight that things have changed and gotten much,
So how would
much,
you describe
much
the
better.
industry today compare?
Oh, night
Today's
and day.
situation?
So first of all, and I'm not saying the problem is solved, right? I'm
Yeah.
just saying the progress is tremendous. We still are in the, you know,
I think it's a process forever.
it's a process, probably, that's right, it's a process forever. To create a truly egalitarian society will take forever. And unfortunately, we're in a period of great social regression.
Right.
The rise of misogyny, the women in America are the only population where we've constitutionally had a right removed. There's no other group who has had a right constitutionally revoked.
Oh.
We've had rights that have been undermined or ignored or violated, but not actually removed.
Removed.
So it's a very dangerous time, as we know.
Yeah.
Right.
And the rise of misogyny is very dangerous. Very dangerous. But until now, and I think it's also a reaction to the fact that we've had success because we've had so much progress, social progress for women to be viewed as, you know, leaders and equals, and that's why there's such a reaction.
I have a feeling, and I might be wrong, that all the consequences of Me Too come down a bit. It went very strong, very far, and then whoops, something went backwards a little bit. Where are we standing with this today?
Well, Weinstein was just
Thank you. You took the word out of my mouth last week.
Yeah,
The same day that the Weinstein verdict was thrown out.
Yeah.
Same day was the day that the Supreme Court seriously entertained arguments that a president could be immune to any criminal prosecution.
right.
They actually had a conversation of if a president ordered the assassination of someone while in office, would that be considered an act of office, and would he be immune? Yes.
And also if he is rape.
So, you know, the great pussy grabber.
Right.
And Weinstein. And in fact, I know for a fact that one of the big incentives to go after Harvey Weinstein with such fury was because they couldn't go after Trump. Like, they're the same guy. And so it was definitely a big reaction. I mean, I went to the Women's March in DC after Trump was elected, and it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. It was, first of all, it was incredibly peaceful, and it was very joyful, and there was just seas and seas and seas of pink hats, and there wasn't any violence. There were no uprisings. It was a beautiful celebration of solidarity and strength, and really felt, okay, this is optimism. We can do something if we all organize together and rise up. We can keep ourselves safe and free. And I do think that is, hey, it's not like it's my theory that there's two ways that Biden could get reelected. Is one, the pink wave, I call it the pink wave,
Right.
the right to choice, the right to control of your own body, could really get women to the polls.
I think if all women of the United States will decide that they need to watch themselves, they should vote Biden.
Well, you'll be
sympathetic.
No. I think they should.
They should.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And then, of course, those who understand the threat to democracy. So those are the two, and that's what the Democrats are running on too.
So after you describe all this, your journey,
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's still true because I didn't check it, I must admit, in the last few years. But up to a few years ago, most of student females in our department wanted to become director, and by the time they graduated, they changed their mind.
Mm.
And they thought that they would be producers and director, writers, but they didn't see much future. The question how
Right. Well, I have to say, I mean, again, I haven't seen the statistics, but I think that's true of most students, no matter what their gender is. That as they go through the program, they start to understand how very difficult it is to have a sustaining career, a sustainable career as a director or as a writer-director.
But not
So
only
I don't,
in films, not only in films. I think that it's in every field almost. If you plan to be married, to get married, or to have children, you have a problem because most of the organization won't give you a hand.
yeah, but I think the point, I think that that's true, you know, that's why I'm saying we haven't solved the problem, but I think specific to NYU, what Tzipi was saying is that most women come in, those who come in wanting to be writers, directors, filmmakers, the leadership role in the film, generating film, leave feeling like they want to take a subsidiary position. But I would venture to say that I think that that's true of all of our students, that they enter wanting to be Martin Scorsese or Greta Gerwig,
Right.
and they start to understand, number one, how very difficult it is in this field to be Marty or Greta, full stop. And then they find other ways that they really are very creatively fulfilled. They might discover, hey, I love editing.
But the amount of applicants is going up.
I know. It's
Amazing.
well, that's a whole nother question of what is the future of our industry and AI and what's going on.
Right.
But there's certainly more room than there has ever been.
Right.
For women and people of color and non-binary to be part of this storytelling. Again, night and day difference. But it is always going to be extremely challenging to do this work, no matter what your identity or who you are.
Right.
And so I think a fair amount of our students figure that out along the way, and they shift their, so I don't know that it's specifically the women who are feeling discouraged.
Right.
I think that
no, I'm
all
talking of them, and I told, I try to direct them to do low budget films, but then you cannot make money. So it's like almost a dead end in this respect,
and worse than ever.
Yeah.
The fact is that
I'm asking you as well. Do you think that we'll ever get to a point that people will be judged by their talent and ability and not by the rest?
What do you mean by the rest?
But if you're a man,
their identity,
man, color or not,
I don't believe. I don't believe so.
Talent and ability. Do you think we'll ever get?
I don't believe so. There will be too many forces to go against it, and the more if you have one like Greta who did Barbie, right? No, how many men were so successful like her, and they don't like. I don't think they like it. I think they will. I don't know. I'm a very optimistic, right?
Yeah.
But my feeling is it will not come to equality completely. It's not even a little bit.
It's not question. I'm not talking only about equality. I'm talking about humankind. Just to judge by your talent and ability and anything that you present. Do you think we have a chance to get there one day?
I don't think that's human nature.
No,
I think human
and
nature.
look at all the women who
tribal.
even made it in business. How many of them did it by themselves, starting from scratch, and did it? How many Zuckerberg women? He took women and gave them to lean in. But we don't. I want to. There are two subjects I want to make sure I grab from her. Since we are still in school, you go every day to teach and you confront those demonstrations. And I'm asking you, Janet, that I love you very much. And I know how much you invest in the teaching, how many hours you invest in trying to figure out how to make it better for them, how to help them grow, how to help them go into the world. And then they aren't, and of course, we all believe that they are entitled to any view and think whatever they want, they can demonstrate. But how come so many of them don't know what they're talking about? Nobody told them to do research. We tell them to do research when they,
Yeah.
do a documentary or they come up with an idea for a fiction. They have to
Yeah.
do research, but what's going on? And what can we do?
Well, okay, this is such a,
And you talk to Israelis, right?
yes, I know. I think that there's a gestalt here. There's a gestalt of perspective. And let's not forget, these are undergraduates. We're talking about people
Young
who are between the ages of 17, 18 and 21, 22. And I think that there is a kind of, I remember being that age, and boy, to quote Dylan, I'm so much younger than I was older than that now, I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. I was never as sure, as confident, and as unequivocal in my life as I was during the time I was 17 to 22 years old. I knew exactly what was right, what was wrong, who was right, what was wrong, what side of history. I knew everything, right? So I think we're talking developmentally about a period of time in one's life where, there's not a lot of nuance. I don't think people of that age are living in shades of gray. I think they are living in a kind of righteousness, a sense of righteousness and righteous indignation. And God bless them for that, because we need that passion and that conviction to be able to make social change. But the fact is, this is an extremely nuanced and complex problem. And I think, a fair amount of that is getting lost. Now, I would like to say that from what I understand, the majority of people who are protesting are having a more measured, balanced sense. That I think what they're crying out against is the humanitarian outrage and just wanting a ceasefire, because nothing is going to get solved. Well, there's this kind of slaughter going on.
Right.
And so there's a humanitarian hue and cry, which I completely understand and personally share. This has got to stop. I mean, the UN is calling for it. The bombs have to stop. This killing, it just has to stop.
I agree with you.
Right. So I feel like that's what is being said by the majority of the
You
students.
know that the only problem is that we don't know what otherwise we could do and make sure that this incredible terrorist group, the Hamas, will be out. So we don't have, we agree with everything you said, but I personally, and I'm sure, because we always were part of every peace movement that you can imagine.
Right.
What could be done because they don't care about people.
Well, exactly. And the fact is, Hamas doesn't want, the last thing that Hamas wants is a ceasefire.
Yeah.
And by the way,
I mean, it's unbelievable.
we also can't forget that this is a war of proxy. This
Right.
is a war of proxy. So behind Hamas is Iran and Russia.
Right.
So there's a lot of forces going on here, but that doesn't mean that we should not ask for it, not demand it.
Why don't we go and ask them in all this energy? Why don't you, as young people, come with an idea how we can provide future for those people?
I don't think that at that age they can come with ideas about how, I mean, it's not realistic because they still in the beginning of their journey, and they like the action and the vibe and part of the whole party.
So we cannot do anything as an institution?
It's not that we cannot do.
As an institution. You see,
Well, I'll tell you.
I talk to my students. I told them you can think everything, anything you want. What is done now is out. It's terrible. What they did was out.
Was terrible, right? But
let's find ways to solve. And I talk to them. To all my classes.
The question
so I think that
also if we should stop them or not, because they have to get it out.
No, we cannot stop.
Well, it's also a civil rights issue, and this is where I feel strongly about. I mean, Voltaire said, "I may detest what you're saying, but I'll fight to the death your right to say it."
Yeah.
And in a free society, especially in a university, we absolutely must preserve and protect civil disobedience. And where it's very confounding is the now, for sure, there's outside agitators. For sure, there's been vile acts of anti-Semitism and violence. And for sure, there's been,
and there's a very organized, rich forces behind the scene that
Yeah.
feed this.
But that's not what the majority of students are doing. And we have, so peaceful acts of civil disobedience, why are we calling in the police on that?
I don't know.
That's wrong. It's
Yeah,
just wrong.
they really, a lot of them are actually now joining the demonstrations because of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Because it's been grossly mishandled.
Right,
Grossly mishandled.
right,
And it's against everything that we stand for as a university.
right.
Because if we want to create nuance, if we want to broaden the discussion, then we have to be engaging and talking and having teach-ins and sharing points of view, not calling the police when a group of peaceful demonstrators say, we want peace, we want a ceasefire. And then you call in the police? It's craziness. It's upside down. It's wrong.
In a way,
Right.
it's not taking responsibility for the action in the university. But do you think, in a week or very soon, all the universities are going on a summer break? Do you think things will come down, or because the students are
question.
going home?
They may not
I
go.
don't know.
What are they going to
They
do?
may not go home.
I don't know. I mean, I was just talking to a friend about this earlier this morning. I mean, we're going to find out. Let me put it that way. I personally, I think that most of them will leave campus, but it won't end. A dedicated group will stay.
Will
Yes.
stay.
Right, right.
But, and a lot depends on how the universities engage from this point forward.
Right.
And I pray that our leadership will engage and have dialogue and not continue in the vein it began last week
Right.
of police action.
Right.
It's
I hope so.
completely wrong-minded.
Right.
So, and I still believe there's room where we are not Columbia University. It hasn't gotten to that.
Right,
I
right.
do believe that there's room to pull back and to engage in
Conversations.
conversation and
Right.
again, outside agitators are a different story.
Right.
But I do believe the majority of our students and faculty are having peaceful civil disobedience,
Right,
stating outrage against something that is outrageous.
right, right.
And
Right.
then we have to have a
Yeah.
conversation. Because quite frankly, if there were some clear solutions of how to solve things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying, why don't the
There
students?
are, but
Nobody has answers. I mean, every road that you go down is another dead end. But does that mean that we have to stop?
except two-state solution.
I also think that it will be very crucial to see how they open the next year of
Right.
the academic next
Yeah.
year, to see how the presidents of the
Right.
university will lead
Yeah.
a whole process of how to welcome the students when they start.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think it should be examined very deeply and very
It
widely.
will.
Yeah.
That really.
But
Listen,
don't forget that in
Yeah.
the fall, there's going to
Yeah.
be a very different issue,
Right.
Yeah.
which is the election.
Right.
And
Oh, listen, Tzili, unfortunately, I have a suggestion here. There is a huge subject. She is really not only one of the founders of the independent film industry. She didn't mention it, she also made shidduchs. She also made matchmaking. For example, one of the biggest, most important independent company was when she took, what is his name? Ted
Hope and James Seamus.
and James Jamus, teamed them together and they opened up a Good Machine, right? Which became a fantastic, unbelievable independent. So as much as she was, front runner in the independent industry, she is very active also in the autism.
Yes.
Thing. So I would like to invite you again to talk about that.
Okay.
Because this is not only you dedicated, some of your films to that, but you also, if I may, you're very, very lucky that you have an autistic a child with a high, good function, right? He's not like he's independent. I even know that he had a girlfriend. I am like swimming there. So I would like to invite you again, because it's not only about autism per se, but also about how much film can open up the door to understanding and change and etc. So if that's okay, invite you again.
Absolutely, because you're right. That's another hour.
Wow. Yeah. Right. I don't know.
And in fact, tonight I'm going to a special event screening of a beautiful movie that I was giving some consultation to called Ezra, that's going to be opening in the theater soon. It's produced by Bill Horberg, who's a friend of mine, directed by Tony Goldwyn, who's a wonderful director and a lovely guy. And Robert De Niro was one of the executive producers and is in it. And it's written by the father of a son on the autism spectrum, and it's sort of a kind of an extrapolation of his own experiences raising his son. And it's funny and moving and beautiful and beautifully made, and it's called Ezra. And I'm going to a screening just tonight about it. And
streaming, there will be streaming.
It's a special event screening. It's going to be opening in about 2 weeks. It's going to be open. Bleecker Street Theater,
right.
Bleecker Street Cinema distribution company is taking it out, called Ezra. And so I saw an earlier cut of it, and they consulted with me when they were starting to go into production and casting to talk about autism community and how to work with autistic actors, because it is essential to cast autistic actors to play autistic characters.
You didn't.
Which is something, and they did.
No, you didn't.
No. I'm saying that now today, if you're going to make a movie with an autistic character, it is essential that you cast an autistic actor in that role. Right. When I made my movies, the conversation was just beginning. And I made 2 movies where I did not do that. If I were to make another movie today, I would absolutely cast.
And they were amazing, your two actors. I mean.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I definitely felt that I had the opportunity to work with neurotypical actors to interpret in a way that was going to be very authentic, because of my own experiences as a mother and being sort of the community. So I didn't feel like I was like a visitor to Planet Autism. But again, this is a bigger conversation. But just to say that in the 12 years since I started to step into the role of filmmaker, that's another world that has opened up and changed.
Right.
Is that the opportunity for diversity, the whole neurodiversity movement has really grown, and opportunities have grown. We have students in our program who self-identify on the autism spectrum. I've had several of them in my class. I'm sure you have too, Tzipi.
Yeah.
And so, the world has been making a space for many more people.
Right.
My fear and concern is that we are in this fascist, reactive, right-wing authoritarian rise throughout the Western world.
Right.
And we're coming to the death of Western liberalism. And I think that's because we've been so successful.
Yeah,
that's for
sure.
sure.
Reaction. So all the doors that have been open for so many people are going to get shut. And
so I don't know, but yeah,
so
but we'll meet again, and we'll.
But I want to ask you, I want to take you for a second back to the theater and ask you, out of curiosity, what is your take on this political correct casting of all colors, all kinds of actors, just for the sake of having everybody on stage? Even
at Ibsen adaptation or Chekhov
adaptation. Every classic adaptation. What do you think?
I think that it depends on the creative vision of the interpreter, quite frankly. I mean, sometimes it feels very jarring and doesn't work. Sometimes it feels wonderful. I don't have a blanket response to it. I think it's case by case. What's the vision behind it? Sometimes you feel like it's really patronizing, right? The people are.
You need the right excuse.
Yeah, right. So sometimes you feel like, what is this virtue signaling? And then sometimes it's like incredibly creative interpretation, and lifts us, into a broader place, kind of the liminal space of the imagination. I think so. It just depends on who's doing it. It just depends on who do it. I don't say yes or no.
Soon back.
Okay.
We'll see you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.